Welcome to episode 70 of the Necronama.com.
Keep away from Pumpkinhead, unless you're tired of living. His enemies are mostly dead. He's mean and unforgiving. Laugh at him and you're undone. But in some dreadful fashion, vengeance he considers fun, and plans it with a passion. Time will not erase or blot a plot that he has brewing. It's when you think that he's forgot, he'll conjure your undoing. Bolted doors and windows barred, guard dogs prowling in the yard. Won't protect you in your bed. Nothing will. From Pumpkinhead.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And this movie is a great reminder that a lot of times white people are way scarier than the people we think are scary.
Oh my God. And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I'm not even going to follow that one up.
I stole your joke. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, well, it could be worse. It could be somebody who's pretending to be a race that they're not in order to get advancement in a career and book sales. But anyway, that story is never going to go away.
Very darkly. Our guests have already given up and logged out. So we have two guests today.
Right?
Yes, definitely. So we have two guests today, and we're excited to have you both. I can't wait for you to talk about this book you're going to talk about. I have an advanced copy, and I've been making my way through it. I haven't totally finished it, but I love the feel, and I'm gonna let you basically give the pitch to everybody instead. But everybody go buy this once they talk about it. All right, so you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us. I'm Josh Viola. The editor of It Came From the Multiplex, 80s Midnight Chillers. And I agree, I think everybody should go buy this book. It's very fitting for the podcast. It's essentially just an anthology of short fiction, short stories from various authors that's themed around 80s horror films. So it's very excited it comes out here this month.
Very cool.
Hi, my name is Alvaro Zinos-Amaro, science fiction writer. I write a lot of short stories. I also have done a ton of reviews, nonfiction essays, interviews with various writers, a couple of book-length projects, including one that was a book of interviews. And essentially, I'm here because, Josh just gets too giddy about films like this. And fortunately, he's self-conscious enough, he's self-aware enough that he decided that I should be here to ground him and kind of pull things back a little bit.
That kind of sounds
this
like
is going to be a fun episode.
Man,
we don't have a relationship.
I'm waiting for the I'm going to throw some punches, man.
And I actually want to say just quickly in terms of the book that Josh was talking about. So I have a short story in this anthology. It's called Negative Creep because I was feeling pretty autobiographical when it was time to write the story. But I did try to find a connection explicitly between Pumpkinhead and the story that I wrote. And I have to confess, I had not seen Pumpkinhead when I wrote that story. In fact, I just finished watching it like 2 hours ago.
Nice.
Very fresh in my mind. But I did find the closest that I found was that there is a line of dialogue from a really terrible 80s horror film called The Stepfather that I actually quote in my story. And the line says, "I don't think we need to break up a family, do we, Pumpkin?" So I figured that is kind of close.
Nice.
So I read Negative Creep and I liked it a lot. I don't want to give away the ending, but the The thing that's going on was very interesting to me because it's so different from what I normally see. And I really appreciated the twist, if you will. I don't like using that word in this sense because it's not so much a twist, it's ongoing throughout. But it's such a twist on the trope in that way. And I really enjoyed that. My main thing that I want to say about that is I feel like it also really pulls in just the relationships of the characters the same way Pumpkinhead does, where not necessarily everybody in the group gets along, or like some are kind of there for one person instead of all five, or that kind of thing. And I find that really refreshing because so many slashers and different things, it's like everybody's best of friends, and that's always weird to me because I've been in a large group of friends and we never all like each other. So yeah, I think there's more similarities than you're giving it, but you know.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for the praise.
Sure.
I have things to say about a story, but I'm going to wait until I hear his take on Pumpkinhead, and then I'll dive in.
My estimation of the film is climbing rapidly here with all of the use of confidence about my work. I'll say what you guys need.
I'm a fan, if you can't tell.
So when this book came about, like, how did that happen? Like, did you have the idea for a long time, or was it like something that really struck something with you and you needed to do it right now, or like, what's the backstory on the book?
I guess to really go back, I edited a book for Georgetown, Colorado Writers Retreat a few years back. And that basically the Writers Retreat, the people that put that book together, they had reached out to me because they were fans of one of the first horror anthologies I put out, which was Nightmares Unhinged. And they asked if I would put the Georgetown an anthology together for their Writers Retreat in Georgetown. And so I did, and that went well. And some of the people that attended that show, Brett and Jeannie Smith, and they're in Colorado. They're big. They volunteer to a lot of conventions, and they're very involved in that world, that background. And I had gotten to know them a little bit, but they really were fond of that anthology that was put together. And so they decided to co-found Colorado Festival of Horror, which was actually supposed to debut, I think, originally next week before COVID hit and changed the plans for 2021. But Brett and Jeannie Smith reached out, and they asked if I would be interested in putting together a convention exclusive of sorts anthology to tie it into what they were doing. And we just got together and we threw out some ideas for some themes, some that were vastly different than what the book turned out to be, but we all three of us had just a love for 80s horror cinema, and that's sort of what started it, and took it from there, really, and it became what it is, which I'm very proud of. I think it's one of the best anthologies I've been lucky enough to edit.
Well, and this shouldn't matter as much as it does, but let's face it, it does. This is a beautiful book layout-wise.
Thank you.
Like I don't want to give too much away. I don't know what you want me to say and don't want me to say, but I love the graphics on basically every other page. I love the chapter graphics, but just even the way the pages are just they're like the font's a little bigger and better spaced than a lot of books, and I'm old. I'm like 108, and reading's really hard for me sometimes. And I really appreciated how clean this book looks, and the graphics just add such a nice touch of the theme to remind you where you are while you're reading this, if you will. Like, it gives you that ongoing reminder that you're sitting in the multiplex watching this, and I loved that so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with Hex Publishers, my background is in art. I used to be an art director for in video games primarily, but so I work with a lot of different artists. So the design is really important to me, and I think that we were lucky enough to work with some of the people we worked with. and just to kind of touch on that a little bit, the cover art, which is just fantastic, is by AJ Nazzaro, and he's I've known him through conventions and stuff for quite some time, but he's one of the lead artists on the video game Hearthstone, which is a spin-off of World of Warcraft, and it's huge right now. So he jumped on board to tackle the cover art, and then Brett and Jeannie's son Xander, he actually did the chapter art, and he's a concept artist in Hollywood, and he's worked on some cool horror stuff like Scream Queens, I think Godzilla vs. Kong, and some other things like that. And then one of the cool little features that the book has is, which I think you have a PDF version, so you can't really, see it the way it's meant to be seen.
Hey, I still definitely understand it.
But there's a little flip book header, a piece of art at the top. So when you flip through the pages, that animates, and it's this cool, creepy little, a box of popcorn has fallen over, and there's like tentacles and nasty cockroach-looking legs that are squirming about. So when you flip through the pages, it adds that, and that's by Aaron Lovett, who has done a lot of artwork for us in the past. But it's I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And the cover, it's kind of got that. If you have the physical book in hand, it looks like an old VHS movie. So kind of fun.
I'm glad you brought up the flip book. I didn't want to give that away because I never know what I'm allowed to say and not, and it doesn't dawn on me to ask ahead of time. I'm only on like episode 72. I'll learn one day. But no, what I love about it is, this book is about the multiplex, and then you literally give people the ability to make a little film in their hands. That's so fucking cool. I love
Thank you. I didn't think of it that way, but I'm gonna sure as hell use that now when I talk about it.
As with you should. No, you have some great authors in here as well. I've really liked the stories. Like I said, I didn't quite get time to finish the whole thing, but I'm about halfway through, and I've loved everything I've read. I didn't know how much I needed a book like this, and I love it. So,
well, thank you.
Also. Yeah. Not to pick out any short story, but Helluloid is one of the greatest names I've ever seen, by the way. So,
yeah, that's a good story. That's I think Kevin Dillmore and Dayton Ward, authors of that story. Yeah.
Yep.
And just to give everybody, it's not a huge book by any means, but just call out some of the authors in the table of contents if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
So the book features Warren Hammond and Angie Hodap, which they're a married couple, friends of mine, phenomenal writers, and they had this brilliant idea of doing a double feature of sorts. So the book opens with Warren's story, and Angie follows it up with the sequel, which was an awesome idea. But we've got Steve Rasnick-Tim, Kevin J. Anderson, Betty Rocksteady, Stephen Graham Jones, Gary Jonas, Paul Campion, Keith Farrell, Orrin Gray, Sean Eads, Mario Acevedo, Dayton Ward, Kevin Dillmore, Kay Nicole Davis, and my buddy Alvaro, who's on the phone with us. So they're on the call with us. I think he's my buddy. Again, that will be seen shortly.
That dynamic could suffer a lot on this podcast.
I have a feeling it's going to.
And then one
gift we bring.
I want to say, you were talking about the beauty of the object,
yes.
James. I love also the back copy. It's just really spectacular. Whoever came up with that text did an amazing job.
It could have been better. No, I got help there. I forgot about that. I'm sorry. Yes, Alvaro helped me knock that out, and it's so much fun. I'm very pleased with that. So
very cool.
It was a blast.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about all of the projects that we put out through Hex is like it's really collaborative and get to work with a lot of people that I'm quite fond of. So it's always fun.
I love it. Awesome. So let's jump into the film, and let me ask you my favorite question to ask everybody. Why did you pick Pumpkinhead?
Well, I mean,
explain yourself, Josh, please.
As far as just pure horror, I'm a huge movie buff, and I love a lot of films, but just straight up horror, that's my favorite. I'm a big fan of 80s creature features, and it's all subjective. It has to do a little bit with my background and how I came to discover the film, but I absolutely love it, and I watch it every Halloween, every year. It kind of gets me in the mood. So, I picked it because it's amazing, and everybody should watch it over and over and over every year. Awesome. And I'm going to defend it. You'll see, because I'm sure there's going to be some critique coming my way. So.
Nothing serious from my end. I mean, I liked it. I remember watching it 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago.
Wow. I
think with my cousins in Virginia. So it was one of those movies at the time definitely worked as far as scaring the shit out of you. And now I watch it in just like a lot of things that James and I talk about from time to time. I'm fucking rooting for the monster. Like, I don't give a shit about the kids, the college kids, anything. I was sitting there like, don't hurt Bunt, the little poor kid. And I fucking love Bunt in this. Like, when I didn't get it when I was a kid, because again, the big attraction is the monster. You're waiting for him to, devour, kill people, do all these things. But as an adult, I'm like, no, I don't care about the final girl. I want Bunt to survive, because he's the one who does not deserve any of this shit. If he somehow gets on Pumpkinhead's radar.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny now when I go back and watch it too, because Ed Harley's son reminds me of the Jerry Maguire kid.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So,
on that note, the Jerry Maguire kid, nothing against him personally, but the movie version of him just annoyed the hell out of me, because he was everywhere, right?
He needed to die in this film.
And I watched this, I hadn't seen it in, I don't know, decades, right? So it was like watching it fresh. And when I saw him, my very first reaction was that. And then by the time it got into his story, I was like, I like this kid way better. And then I was sad when he died. I was like, that's weird. I don't normally care. How did they get me to care about this kid?
I couldn't stand the Jerry Maguire kid either. So when in retrospect, when I go back, I just picture him in Pumpkinhead and I'm fine. So,
Dad, what did you do? But
had you seen this before, James? Was this a rewatch, or was it new for you?
I mean, it's so long that it's like it's not, because I was probably a teenager the last time I saw it. I definitely haven't seen it anytime recently. So like going in, I mean, it was occasionally something would flash and I'd remember it. But yeah, overall, I mean, I might as well have been watching it the first time.
Do you feel that it held up? I mean, I'm curious, because we can't ask Josh that question because he watches it too often, right? So there's like,
yeah, definitely.
There's no long absence there. But I'm wondering, maybe for you, Don, and for you, James, like it sounds like there's a significant gap in time, right, between the original viewing and.
So for me, I absolutely think that it held up. I watch a lot of slashers. I'm very into slashers. I've been watching more creature features. And so many of them feel very dated and very, I don't know, like they should just be better than they are, right? And this has points where it feels dated. But what was interesting about this to me is that different parts felt dated in a different way.
Yes,
it was like it wasn't congruent, like it wasn't happening at the same time. And I thought that was really weird, but it kind of worked for me. And then as far as Pumpkinhead himself, I was amazed at how good he looks for when this was made.
Yeah, the only thing that took me out of it, and I mean this at the least amount of emphasis, is I felt at certain parts when you saw Pumpkinhead. Now, correct. Definitely inform me of this. Did the same team that worked on Alien, or at least some of the same visual effects people who worked on Alien, work on this film, or no?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Stan Winston directed the film, and his crew worked on the effects. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I saw the similarities between the xenomorph and Pumpkinhead as far as the body,
Right.
and so with the advancements that have been made on the xenomorph in visual effects and even in CGI, it definitely it looked dated in some ways, because even my wife, she was watching it with me, and she's like, yeah, this movie held up until I got a good view of the monster. I'm like, well, fuck it. It was 87 when this came out. Of course, you're going to see some stuff.
Yeah.
But it still would work to the point where I didn't want my daughter. She loves horror movies, but I didn't want my daughter watching it, because I knew that would have been one of those things like, so explain, does the monster get buried and then it comes back, and like, we have a cemetery behind our house. Is that the same thing? There would have been all types of conversations that would have worked and not worked. But I think the overall themes and issues that are present in this film resonate to where they can still be done in 2020 or make sense in 2020. Because there's nothing that's so obscure and so weird where, you can't make heads or tails of it.
Yeah, and what I want to add to what I said was when I say that he held up, I mean, when I think movies that came out at this time and how they look to me now, he held up in that regard. I don't mean that if it came out today, I would think, wow, this is an amazing monster. Like, it's still good, but like,
See it?
And then
that's
the one
where
thing.
I disagree.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let me just throw this one other thing out though. The other place that I feel that this is lacking, it isn't its fault because it doesn't have the 30 years of build, but we get so used to kills and how they have to be amped up to keep our interest that I think if this dropped right now, the kills would be like, meh. So in that way, it doesn't hold up as much as I was hoping it would. Like, I was hoping there'd be some crazier fucking shit happening. But yeah, all right, go ahead, guys. Eat me alive. I'm ready.
No, I actually totally agree with you on the kills. It's lackluster in that sense. And I think that had a little bit to do with just, what the monster was as far as like a practical standpoint and how they could work with it. Because there's definitely some goofy sequences, but for me, that adds to the charm, right? It's definitely a campy B movie. So in a way that works, but I think that the creature effects are totally phenomenal. I think that the creature itself and the makeup work and the prosthetics and all of that is great. I think what maybe gives, in my opinion, the vibe or the illusion that if you put it in something today, it wouldn't hold up. I don't know. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that's done through CG and camera work and all of that. I think it would totally hold up. I think everything was so raw and gritty, and I believe the budget was like $3 million or $4 million or something like that. So I don't know. I just wonder if it has to do more with the actual hardware as to how it was filmed as opposed to the creature effects, if that makes any sense. But I'm also a huge nerd when it comes to practical effects. I much prefer that to the overuse of CG.
Yes.
But I don't know. What I love about the movie too is just the atmosphere. It's like thick and foggy, and the lighting. It just works for me. It's got those like cold blues that are contrasted by deep oranges, which feels very Halloween. And then like the gritty like nature of the film, just that they used and how it was filmed in a way like kind of blends it all together. It and the score, which I'm sure doesn't work for everybody. It just, for me, it's just like the perfect group of ingredients thrown into a blender, and it's and again, it's got some really wooden acting, and it's got some lackluster kills for sure, and it has its faults, but in a way, it just kind of plays to the charm of that the way the movies were made back then, I think.
Right. I feel like you're starting to do my work for me, Josh. I mean, maybe I should just let you continue to say bad things about this movie that you love so much.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding. I want to touch on something that you said, James, and then also just combining that with what you were talking about, Josh. So and I'll probably use the music to get into it. So the score by Richard Stone was an element that at times I found very effective, but at other times actually ruined my suspension of disbelief. And it has nothing to do, I think, with how effective it is or not. It's just with my personal sort of aesthetic. The parts where it was more synth based and it was a little bit darker and, more of that 80s horror sort of gothic ambiance. I really liked those sequences. The parts where it's more, sort of harmonica and twangy guitars, they didn't really work that well for me. It just felt a little bit too different from the rest of the experience, and it pulled me out. But that actually reminds me of what you were saying, James. So the thing about the congruence or lack thereof in the film, I think that works both as a plus and as a minus. It's really interesting watching this for the first time, never having experienced it before. So I just said the same thing twice. That there's different elements of genre that I think that the film plays with and fits into. So on the one hand, like you were saying, you've got like the creature feature aspect, obviously, and we've already talked a little bit about that. It also, their narrative structure has a little bit of that classic slasher vibe, and both of you guys touched on that on different ways. And I think that that's something that maybe dovetails with the story in my short story in Josh's book a little bit. But then it also has like this whole other aspect of folklore horror, which I think is really interesting. And I think that part to me was the most intriguing, because it's a subgenre of horror that I enjoy, but we don't have a lot of it, not nearly as much as I think, creature features or slashers that are considered part of the horror movie canon. So I thought, that there were some abrupt changes in the tone. There seems to be a lot of character development after the prologue, setting up the relationship between Billy and his dad. And by the time you get to the third act, it is basically just a slasher. Like there's not really any character development happening at all. And I had a hard time, for example, really following the character journey of the dad in how quickly he goes from having unleashed Pumpkinhead to being, regretful and wanting to put an end to the destruction. So for me, it was hard to kind of go on Ed's journey. That was one of the things that I struggled a little bit with.
I could agree with that, because I did not care about Ed at all.
Right.
At all. I mean, because typically with these movies, when James and I and the guests discuss it, and it's a father or a mother trying to save their kid or trying to avenge their child, there's some type of emotional connection that's made. I had none with him once he goes on this quest to bring Pumpkinhead back, and then instantly regrets it once he realizes, like, oh, the witch was right. This is a hefty price to pay, which should always be a warning. It's if right. If someone rejects your money and says, "I don't want your money," this is going to be a different price. Yeah, dude, this is. And and they're calling to use your blood. I'm like, I've been around enough of this stuff to know this is not good.
Yeah, read the room.
Particularly when they're turning you down and you're offering silver coins, and you are, you're pushing spiders aside from a table so that you can put these silver coins in a, clearly kind of totemic, ancient cup, and you're still being turned down. It's like, okay. Maybe it's
and you're talking to the crypt keeper over here. Like, I mean, something's got to click at some point, right? You can't be so white rage mad that you don't notice any of this.
I also, before we get more into the movie, I want to go on a complete digression.
Okay.
And so I just want to say that when COVID started, the first full week that I was in lockdown, it was the week of March 22nd. Specifically on that day, I was starting to lose my mind, and I watched this completely obscure, now forgotten film that came out in 1990, which is basically a cop buddy movie. It's really bad. It's called Downtown. It's got Anthony Edwards and Forrest Whitaker in it. And
God, I've seen that.
Oh, wow. Okay,
I've seen that movie.
It's amazing. This is astonishing. So
My favorite line from that movie is "Kiss my white ass."
There's a scene in that film, and just again, more trivia. That was the first film that was released theatrically in the U.S. in 1990. Came out like January 12th, 1990. So I'm watching this movie, and there's this scene where Anthony Edwards is trying to get one of his kids to eat his food during dinner. And so he starts impersonating different Star Trek characters to sort of pretend that, the plate with the food is like the starship and it's coming towards his kid and he's going to eat it and blah, blah, blah. And because my mind was completely breaking and fragmenting at that point already in the pandemic, I thought, it would be interesting to see if other movies from the 90s also have these weird Star Trek references. And then I came up with this conspiracy theory. What if every movie made from a certain period of time, you can find something that connects that film by like a first degree, somebody that worked on it, explicit reference to Star Trek. And by the way, a little bit of context, I'm kind of a Star Trek fan. And so I just wanted to say before we got into this that it was very gratifying when I started looking at this movie about an hour before the podcast in terms of like who worked on it. And I found not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 connections to the Star Trek franchise.
See, you should like it more.
Well, it sort of just makes me think of like, why couldn't it have been more Star Trek? But I'm not going to necessarily enumerate all 5 because they do get very obscure, but I'm going to share 2 of them with you. So Dan Curry was the guy that designed the title for Pumpkinhead. And he is very famous in the world of the many Star Trek series for having been the visual effects producer and supervisor. Like, he was responsible for the visual effects on Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and so on and so forth. And as a matter of fact, in weird synchronicity, there's a book celebrating the artistry of Dan Curry that's coming out in November. So he did the title for Pumpkinhead, which I thought was pretty neat. And then Tom Woodruff Jr., he was in charge of special makeup effects on Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And he was the guy that was responsible for the creature makeup effects on Pumpkinhead. And he's actually the guy that's in the Pumpkinhead suit. So I thought that was definitely, not a trivial first degree connection. And then there's 3 more, like I said. So
I really should have known you were going to turn this into a Star Trek podcast. I knew it.
You, Josh, you could not get away.
Well, I just want you to know you're gonna start getting emails from me like, "Hey, we're doing a '90s film. Send us your 2-minute breakdown, and I'll add it to the episode."
I love it. Yes, my dad kept like challenging me. He's like, "What about this? What about that?" And I'm like, "Well, there was actually the guy who played like first cello in the recording sessions." He recorded like the start, and it's like, okay, stop. It's too much.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're talking to somebody who soured on the Next Generation because he kept getting Worf references in school, and then tried to track down Michael Dorn at a convention, and little did this person know he was standing right next to Michael Dorn, waiting for Michael Dorn to come out on the stage, and then all of a sudden it's announced, and Michael Dorn as Worf. And then this person turns around to see a man of the same color, complexion, general shape, and, if I may say so, attractiveness, yell out, "Oh, shit," and then turn around running. And then I turn around and see James's face. I'm sorry, this person turns around and sees James's face, and he's fucking laughing his ass off.
Hey, I was nice enough to take a picture of you guys together. I just wasn't nice enough to tell you he was standing there because it would have ruined my picture.
No, I just looked at it for 30 years. I've been trying to get that picture just so I could finally put it as my profile picture and say, "This is my real dad." And then piss off my actual dad.
In fairness, I had no idea. I was literally like, "Oh, that's so cool. They're next to each other." And I took a picture, and then Dorn leaves, and Don's like, "What the fuck, man?" So yeah, I thought I was doing something nice.
For sure. Sure, Alvaro was somewhere there too.
But yeah,
I just think that we're still talking about Star Trek, Josh.
I know you do. You've won. You already won.
Let the anecdotes.
no, as long as we're going to throw out obscure references, I'm going to hit Don with one that I don't know if he's aware of. And this is definitely not Star Trek.
Lance Henriksen tried to audition for Terminator and got turned down?
No.
Oh, okay.
Your boy Bunce was in Society.
Yes, I was going to point that out to you. He was the guy that they... Yeah.
As soon as I saw him, I was like, "Oh shit, that's the guy from Society." we love Society. Anyway,
I've got two more that are not Star Trek related that I'll get out of the way. So the actor Joel Hoffman, he plays one of the kids, Steve, in Pumpkinhead, and he actually plays a very similar sort of character who fortunately talks slightly differently, called TJ in Slumber Party Massacre Part 2.
Nice.
And I thought that's one of the films that I feel really lines up with the sort of vision behind Josh's anthology. And then the other one is the fact that as I was watching this, I found certain parts of the story, and particularly the sort of key emotional arc that it seems none of us is really super invested in. That's Ed's journey. Very reminiscent of Pet Sematary, and
Totally. Yeah.
I'm sure you guys can all see that. And so then I, again, doing a little bit of research, I found out that in Pumpkinhead 2, Blood Wings, a character actually says at one point, "Shit, what the fuck is this place? Pet Sematary?"
See, as much as I love the original, the sequels are just total garbage. So if you think that this one's garbage, just you actually should watch them. I encourage you to.
Because there are like 4 of them, right?
I don't
4 or
even know at this
5?
point. I heard they're rebooting it, which it is what it is. But yeah, no, I think there's definitely parallels there to Pet Sematary for sure. But I think I actually think this is one of Lance Henriksen's best performances. I'm not going into the depth of the character, but I and maybe that's just because he's given more focus and screen time, obviously because he's the lead. But because many of the other actors are pretty wooden, I don't know. Maybe it just makes him stand out in comparison. But I think that he's kind of, if you watch the film today, it really, and I'm, there's a little bit of humor here, but I really do mean it. It's kind of interesting if you think about it as, the world is very polarized right now. Everybody's on, it's very, the tribalism is very prominent right now. So it's kind of interesting, right? Because like Ed's character is so one-sided and so focused on his mission and his POV that he can't see anything beyond that until he's forced to see it from the other side. And while that didn't necessarily work as far as an arc is concerned, as far as social commentary, you can kind of see that, maybe that's what the world needs. It's a little bit of walk in somebody else's shoes so you can finally see beyond that brick wall you got in front of your face.
I like that. I would agree with you. I think that in terms of the performance, Lance Henriksen actually does a really credible job. I just think that the script is not serving him particularly well in terms of getting us to kind of follow that journey, like we were talking about. But I do think his performance is good. There's an interesting take on this movie. The writer, John Kenneth Muir, who's written some really comprehensive books about horror movies, sort of goes decade by decade, book by book. He has this article that he posted back in 2018 about Pumpkinhead, and he actually interprets the story as cinematic folklore, specifically using Jung's archetypes. So he finds this relationship where the Ed characters, like the ego, and then Pumpkin himself is another Jungian archetype, which is the shadow. And then there's like the innocence, which is represented through Billy, which is another archetype, which is the child. And so he gives an interesting reinterpretation of that. But I think that, even if you leave the Jungian stuff to the side, the theme that he talks about, which I agree with, and also like you were saying, Josh, I think pretty contemporary is the idea that, there's a clear demarcation between justice and vengeance, right? And when you sort of become blinded in the desire for vengeance, then really bad things are going to happen. And you're going to unleash things that are pretty much out of your control. So tapping into that tribalism is just not a wise strategy, even if it's to accomplish the thing that you want to do. And in terms of commentary, I was trying to come up with other theories really quickly before this podcast. So and I have a couple of notes that I jotted down, but I think the sort of obvious throwaway one is that this could be seen in an oblique way as a commentary on pandemics. There's that line where basically she says, "There's nothing you can do; you just have to let it run its course." Right. And if you try to get in the way, you're gonna die. It's just not a good thing to get too close to the virus.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
Another one that's pretty glib, I guess, is I think you could think about this movie as an argument in favor of co-parenting. I just keep thinking, like, if Ed was not a single dad, like had to work at the grocery store and all of this stuff, like if he had a significant other around and he said, "Hey, by the way, I'm like going to contact, like, I'm going to just go down and visit Haggis, and we're going to do some like supernatural stuff, and we're going to try to get this force of like pure elemental revenge to be unleashed to kill all these people." I mean, I feel like that partner would probably say, "Yeah, that's not really a good idea." Resurrecting a demon that is just blindly enacting revenge is not the best way to handle this. Let's be a little bit more mature about it. So
you never want to do what I want to do.
I found a quote by I'm trying to pronounce it right, John Kenneth Muir, I think. He's
the guy you just quoted, yeah.
See, I was kind of like zoning out because I don't really care for your commentary anymore.
Let's talk about Star Trek.
I'll really zone out. No, but I agree. But the specific quote that I was referencing was which you did touch on, is that the rejection of vigilante justice, which was popular in the 1980s. So I think that's clearly the theme that we're seeing, and I think that it stands out. But I also wanted to touch on the earlier comment about the creature design, because Stan Winston was the guy behind James Cameron's Xenomorphs and Aliens, and obviously he directed this, and his crew helped build Pumpkinhead. But for me, a little backstory, when I first saw the movie, I grew up in an extremely evangelical, kind of cult-like background, where I couldn't even watch Disney movies because they had some sort of new age agenda that I wasn't allowed to see. So, and satanic panic was, running rampant in the 80s. And so all of the like cool pop culture stuff that my friends were into when I was growing up, I just had this like major attraction to it because it was so taboo and I was so not allowed to see it. And I would go and look forward to spending the night at friends' houses so we could watch, all of this stuff that I just wasn't allowed to see. And Pumpkinhead was, I was really interested in the kind of like the, demonic, satanic elements that was really attractive to me. So when I saw this movie, not only did it scare the shit out of me because I was so young, and I remember I watched it and then I walked home later that night to go get something, and I was like terrified on the walk back in the middle of the night. But I was just really attracted to that whole demonic kind of aspect to it, just again because of my upbringing, and that was so taboo. So that's why I've always had this like fixation on it, because it was really the first movie that scared me and kind of brought me out of that the hole that I was stuck in. But as far as the creature design, you mentioned that it sort of resembles a xenomorph, and I remember watching a back to the behind the scenes kind of featurette on the design, the work, and they specifically were talking about in their first sort of concepts I think that they did have the suit as more of a black toned body, and that they were afraid that it would look too much like the xenomorph, so they tried to go with a more pale, decayed version to kind of offset that and hopefully take away from the similarity. But something that I've like always had in the back of my head that I found unique was that like his silhouette, like the creature's pose and how it moves and how it walks looks like a vulture in a way. And it's like he's always it's like he already knows who's dead. He's already looking at his prey. He's already picked out the just like a vulture, like it knows who's about to die. And I don't know if that was ever intentional in the design, but that's something that's always stuck out in my head, if that makes any sense. Just to kind of ramble on a little bit about the creature.
That makes
design.
perfect sense.
The thing I want to add to what you just said about your upbringing is it's also very interesting that we get this great scene. It's my favorite scene visually of the church, and the it was never completed, right? That's why it's the way it is, and then Pumpkinhead literally takes a cross and destroys it. Like that's very interesting symbolism going on there for what you were going through as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that scene's always stood out to me too, and I'm kind of curious how, if any of you saw it this way, and I'm sure it wasn't intentional by any means, but when Pumpkinhead arrives at the entrance of the church and he starts walking through the church, it's almost like he's walking against like this major current of wind, like he can barely. He's slow. He's almost struggling to walk, and I always interpreted that as like, you know. Because I think that Bunt kind of suggests, let's go somewhere safe. You know, the safest place would possibly be a church, and it's not this fully finished church. So maybe if the structure was completed, and if God was there, that he wouldn't be able to enter. But it's only partially formed. But he still like struggles to sort of walk through this building that maybe would was kind of blunting him a little bit, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that was intentional, but I always kind of registered just his slow approach, like he's just walking against the tide to get to him through there. It's kind of a fun message.
I'm gonna go back and watch that because that sounds fantastic, and I want to see it that way.
Yeah, I did get the same impression on that scene, Josh, and I also felt like when he threw the cross, when he grabs it and like, sort of smashes it on the ground. It's the only time where you see this little bit of glee in Pumpkinhead. He's like, "Ha ha!"
Right. I
now.
Right. No, I think that's and to go back on what Alvaro was saying about the, kind of a dark fairy tale, the folklore. That's something that I'm also very intrigued by and interested in, and those concepts and those ideas of where the demon comes from, and how and why it's going out and exacting this revenge. And it's on a mission. It has no other choice but to fulfill that mission. But I think that it's savoring the mission. Like it is like this pure entity of just pure evil, and it loves what it does, and there's nothing that's going to stop it. And just tied to those, how it came to be and how it's summoned, and those folklore, dark fairy tale elements. Just that's what makes it so fun for me. It just gives your imagination just so much to play with, because it doesn't really show, but besides that brief prologue at the beginning, you don't really know the origins of this thing, and we don't really know what would happen if it fulfilled its mission. You know what I mean? Because I haven't seen all of the sequels. I really stopped after the third one, but they all follow the same sort of pattern where you don't really get to see Pumpkinhead finish the full stretch of its mission. So it would be interesting if there was, because I think that this is based on a poem, is the origin of this thing. I wish that there was more information on what the demon does, and maybe there is, and I just don't know about it.
That's so funny that you say that, Josh. I was immediately interested in the same idea, and so I looked up to see, is there any Pumpkinhead movie where Pumpkinhead actually completes the mission, so to speak? And he's always interrupted, so that has never been shown in any of the sequels.
Yeah, it's kind of curious how they would. I would love some more backstory on that. But instead, we're just getting like crappy sci-fi. I think like literally some of the sequels were done for the Sci-Fi Channel at one point. Maybe I'm wrong there, but
well, you were talking about how the demon savors it, and there's this great line where Haggis says that for each man's evils, a special demon exists. And I was reading that there was a mini series of comics in 2018 where they kind of followed up on that, and the idea was like, if Pumpkinhead is vengeance, then what is each other sin's demons like? And basically the premise, and I don't even know if this was made or what, like I haven't read it obviously, but the premise was like the others are mad at vengeance because he keeps getting pulled up all the time, and they're like, what the fuck, I want to go. And I find that really interesting. So yeah. I'd like to see that too, but I thought that was a cool little.
Maybe they have substitute days where it's kind of like, fuck, I'm tired of doing this shit. Greg, you're in.
Yeah.
But I'm Lust. I don't want to take part in this. No, anyway.
Well, you can lust after all the kills you get to do.
It's funny because I actually have some of the comics. I haven't looked at them in forever. I even have the really shitty video game that they put out, like truly terrible.
I didn't know there was one. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh my God. You should just look up the YouTube.
Hold on a second.
It's so bad. But I'm happy to be. I'm a proud owner.
Nice.
It goes with my little Pumpkinhead shrine, which has. I mean, if something ever happens and I need to call upon Pumpkinhead, it is going after Alvaro. That's like I'm willing to sacrifice my life.
Well, since it never completes its mission, I think I'm going to be okay.
I think this is the first time that a guest threatened another guest's life before I threatened Don's life. Normally, I'm like, I'm going to take you into the woods. You're never coming back. I think this is the first time somebody beat me to it.
We set it up on your podcast.
Roll my eyes.
So to bring it back to social commentary for a minute, one of the things that really stuck out to me, the whole Ed doing this and causing this just struck such a chord with me when I look at like what was her name, Barbecue Becky, or one of these women that call the police, and then the police show up and kill somebody, and then the person that called him is like, well, that's not what I wanted to have happen. And it's like, no, you don't get to, no. Like somebody's selling some hot dogs in front of your apartment complex and you call the cops. Like, the dangers involved in this, right? You know that this didn't need cops involved. And I felt the same way with it. And I did want to see more of Ed's transformation because I do feel like it was too fast. But it really struck a chord with me in that whole, oh, I hate you, I'm going to rain down hell on you. And then when it's actually happening, it's shit. I'm sorry. But that doesn't solve it. I don't know if any of you saw it that way, but
Ed is like a Karen, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's great.
But and then going with the whole Black Lives Matter kind of comparison, Bunt's family literally sits there and locks the doors, and their entire theory is this doesn't affect us.
Wow,
so we don't need to worry about it.
Yep.
They're your neighbors. They're the people you know, and they're the people in your community. And this guy, like, you buy your stuff from him, and he brings it to your house. And now, when some shit's going down, you're like, nah, it doesn't directly affect me. Everybody keep the doors locked. We're not going out there. And I thought that was such an interesting commentary on how community is community until it's inconvenient.
Well, I'm going to argue against you on this one because Haggis warns him and tells him not to do it.
Yeah, but the other family, the outside communities aren't seeing it that way, right? Because she's not warning them.
So you're going with the Karen Becky part of this, okay? So because Haggis tells him not to,
No. What I'm
Keep
saying
going.
is, because Haggis knows what's going on. He's like, oh shit, you fucked up. Like you did this. Or Ed unleashed all this stuff. Everybody get in your cabins, lock your shit up. Don't go outside. You don't want to get mixed up in this. I can see Haggis's point in that. It's kind of like, this is some demonic being that you unleashed, and some things are left better, buried. I mean, to go with where Pumpkinhead actually is, it's best to just leave it buried. Yeah, but at that point, like, what can Haggis really do other than protect his family? Because that's
just not do it.
Well, no. In Crisis, right? In Crisis, you turn to this moment where I need to protect the people that are around me. So if it means I need to lock my home, to go back to Purge or whatever, I need to lock my home and lock my family in here to protect them. That's who I'm going to focus on protecting. Ed is our friend. He fucked up. He's going to have to pay the price for doing this, because if he comes in here, we're all dead too.
And even that guy out in the field who's like, you need to get off my land. Like, he doesn't care to help them. He doesn't care to stop it. Like, he's just wants you gone so that he's not affected. But yeah, what does Haggis get out of this? That's what I want to know. Like, she's turning down the payment, and she's like, well, that's not the payment. The payment's what happens later. But that's not a payment to her. That's a payment to Pumpkinhead. What does she get out of doing this? And why does she warn him not to? And then she fucking does it.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Yeah, I was speaking of. I'm sorry.
Haggis.
I was speaking of Mr. Wallace. I said Haggis for some reason because anyway. No, Mr. Wallace. I'm sorry, not Haggis, but Mr. Wallace. I understand that idea of shutting the door.
He was like, no, we're not fucking going there. No.
Yeah. But for Haggis the witch, which is an awesome name. She's Haggis the Hag. It's one of those tricky things with black magic or dark magic or blood magic, whatever you want to call it, where it's kind of like, or any fairy tales for that matter. This is what you want, but fuck it, you didn't ask me the right question, and so I don't have to tell you everything. He doesn't ask, what's the price, or what is the heavy price? What does this entail? Which is a great witch loophole or witchcraft loophole. Like, well, you didn't ask me that you'd be connected to this monster, this demon, and you'd have to die, and anybody else who that's connected to you or helps or stops Pumpkinhead is going to die. You didn't ask. I see that as that's her way of I guess continuing this immortality that she seems to have of she's going to make her sacrifices or whatever sacrifices she needs to, because she's in that house with the spiders and probably snakes and other shit.
I mean, I think that the Haggis character is really interesting, because I don't think that there's an obvious answer to your point, James, about like what is the exact psychological motivation at each stage in this plot that Haggis has. But I think in a way, Haggis represents this tension between different forces. I mean, she's partially, attuned to the supernatural, but obviously she's still able to interact with humans and kind of have her own, human existence. She's sort of like this bridge between different realms. And one of the interpretations that I think it's a little bit far-fetched, but you could kind of argue that I think slightly dovetails with the one that you were making about people just wanting to look after their own interests in like breaking down into tribalism, is the idea of urban sprawl. So you have, you have the innocent ways of the countryside folks as represented by like Ed and, his kind of idealized existence with his son. And basically those innocent ways are just destroyed by the incursion of these urban dwellers. And, when they're asking Ed what killed Billy, he doesn't say it was an accident. He says it was city folks.
Right.
And then there's also that, I kept wondering, and it's maybe not deliberate, maybe it was just a like throwaway insert, but there's that shot of like the beautiful white horse about 4 minutes in the prologue. And so that, I mean, the white horse is a pretty like well-known symbol in film. And you could contrast that with the instrument of Billy's death, which is it's sort of the opposite. Instead of being pure and elemental, it's like this loud, mechanized, bike. It's this instrument of modern technology that is leading to the death of the innocents.
Well, and white horses often, what's interesting about white horses is there's the symbolism of like wisdom and power on the one side.
Right.
And then in some others, it's viewed as death. So like, I always liked the contrast there, because just because you see it, it doesn't necessarily mean one thing. And I like when the, not to get too deep into my lit crit insanity, but I like when it means different things to different characters. Like it can be one horse in one scene, and it can go these different ways with different people. And I think that's what happens here. Like, I think it's a choice between wisdom and power and death and all these different things. And I did think it was kind of weird that it never came up again, or if it did, I didn't notice it. Like, I thought that we would see the horse again somewhere.
Yeah, me too. I think we've over lit critted so it creates these unreasonable expectations when watching like B movies from the 80s.
Look for our new podcast, Crit Heads.
Critter Heads. There you go. So I have another one. I have more thoughts on commentary that I want you guys to sort of play with and poke holes in.
Please do.
And just to keep tally, so the movie is like Black Lives Matter. It's also commentary on pandemics. It's also commentary on seeking vengeance. It's also an argument in favor of co-parenting. And then it's also a thing about urban sprawl. So it's a really rich movie already if we stop here. But to add to that, I think, what if you read this movie as a sort of commentary on how trauma can reenact itself, and specifically in a subconscious way. So I was thinking about the chain of events that leads to Billy's death. So it's established at the beginning of the film that Billy is very attached to his dog, Gypsy, right? So there's that breakfast scene and he's like feeding him and he's always hanging around with Gypsy. So clearly his dad, Ed, knows that he's very attached to Gypsy. By the way, the dog's freewheeling spirit, it's kind of cool that that's in the name too, the wandering nature of the dog. And so, I think that based on that, I would expect that maybe Ed would be more careful that his son doesn't randomly go off into dangerous places chasing Gypsy, because Gypsy's such a freewheeling spirit. And what if his dad was being careless when he left the store? He goes to run some errand that I don't think that the film ever even bothers to specify what that errand is. It's just some kind of pointless task. What if instead of just being randomly careless, he was sort of being subconsciously careless and really instigating the chain of events that causes his son's accident as a way of eventually reenacting and unlocking his own repressed traumatic memories of having seen Pumpkinhead as a kid?
Damn.
I'm just sitting here like, okay. I'm doing the math in my head. Like,
Josh, take it away.
I didn't think about that.
You just always make me feel stupid. So
that's what I always feel with Dawn. I understand completely. Jeez.
I don't really know how to even add to that.
It's a beautiful theory.
Well, going back to what you brought, I mean, without getting into the depth of it, but I kind of question that myself as far as why are you leaving this seemingly 7-8-year-old kid to man the store on the side of the road?
Right.
Yeah, you can't just close it down for an hour?
And that's what I thought. I put up a little handwritten note that says, be back in 15 minutes or whatever. Because this is a small
Who's
town
coming?
area.
Nobody.
Well, if anybody does come, I mean, this is the type, because I've been in these communities. That's the type of place where it's like, Rick's not at the store. Well, you know what? Let me just take a couple of these cans. I'll put $1 on the windowsill, or I'll leave him a note or something.
Right.
Because there's some people say like, well, shit, I need, because he had fruit and stuff on the porch. It would be a real simple thing for somebody who happens to know him. They drive by. Oh, Rick's not here. Be back in 15 minutes. Oh, well, shit. I'll just sit. I'll smoke, or I'll sit here and wait for him to come back. It's a slow pace of life.
There's city folk when there never are. Like there's this new threat.
Exactly.
And not only that, just assholes. Like that. These aren't just city folk. These are just a bunch of assholes. And I mean, they're assholes from the very beginning. You know, the one, I can't remember who says it, but he's like, "Look at that kid's glasses. Talk about Coke bottles."
Oh yeah.
And
Joel.
That was the moment where I said, "I hope you fucking die within the next 5 minutes."
Then that line accomplished its goal.
Like, no, not Billy. The
No. I know. I'm saying
okay.
So that line accomplished its goal because it made you hate him.
No, I hated them so much because because living in Arizona, I've seen those guys that, well, you know what? Here's just this dirt road on the side of the highway. Let me just make as much dust as possible. And you're sitting there like, you're a fucking asshole. That's what you are. You know, that's what should be on your passport, your ID, and your license plate. I'm an asshole.
Yeah, I think you could. I was also sort of toying around with the idea of trying to reinterpret the movie from the perspective of that character, right? And the reason I got to that is because, like you said, I mean, they have that scene where it's made clear that he's super obnoxious. Yes. And even before that, I mean, that's like probably the third time where they make that point, because he passes the other people on the road and he's like honking and he's like talking to his, girlfriend or whatever in a not very polite way. And, so I was wondering, like, maybe part of the theme could be argued, you could make the argument that it's just that bad choices always catch up with you. Because really, Joel is responsible for Billy's death, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he's the one that ends up killing the kid through negligence. And then he later has that moment where he confesses that his whole life has been a series of fuck-ups. And then we find out he's actually already on probation for another incident recently. So he's just made some terrible choices. And Pumpkinhead kills him, and you can't get away from the consequences of your bad choices. And
I think that's great and I hope it's true, because that's just, Trump. Eventually it's going to catch up with him. Eventually Pumpkinhead is coming, and he's going to seek vengeance. And
are you Pumpkinhead, Josh?
I might be.
I'm willing to make the sacrifice.
Oh. So I or you can look at it, but no, I do think that's a great. It's very simple, but you can't escape the bad things that you've done. You're going to have to pay for it. And
I think that's amazing. It applies to every character.
Eventually, Alvaro's going to get a rejection for his stories.
Wait, but that would only follow if I wrote a bad one, so I'm not seeing the logic.
Oh, okay.
Your premise is a little shaky.
Well, they haven't. Multiplex hasn't come out yet. The people haven't read it yet.
Well, at least somebody on this podcast has. I mean, jeez.
No, I'm kidding.
Just one out of the four of us.
No. Yeah.
Oh man, no, I like that because it plays into every single character. Like even Bunt, he's making bad choices. Like he's doing them with really good intentions, but they're bad choices, and he's been warned not to. And he wants to go see it because he needs to know if it's real. He has to know that's a bad choice.
Right.
Are there any characters in the film that are making good choices? I mean, really, I can't.
That one girl that's dating the asshole is definitely not making good choices. And I think Pumpkinhead makes some good choices. Like when he's slaughtering people.
The cross? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that too, like whatever it takes. But
probably thinking this is idolatry. Oh.
Yeah, even Billy doesn't make good choices. Like Billy could run out there and be like, "Hey, help me get my dog."
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes a really different movie if we do that, and it's really fucking boring, and we're not talking about it anymore.
Well,
But
if that's the case, the kid in Pet Sematary could have been like, "Dad, help me get my ball," as opposed to, what happens. It's kid. I mean,
wasn't
it's
he
one of
like
those
2? He didn't have words.
Doesn't matter. If he can say num nums, he can say ball. No, it's you got a point, but it's one of those things where it's so natural the way that Billy and children in these movies conduct themselves, because that's how he would have reacted.
Absolutely.
We both have kids where they're chasing something, not thinking about, oh shit, there's a car coming down the street, or maybe I need to look left and look right. It's, oh, let me get this real quick. It's going to take half a second for me to run out into the street to grab it and come back. I mean, it's his dog. He's connected to it. I actually thought, because again, it's been forever since I've seen it. I'm like, the fucking dog's gonna get hit. Then I see the kid running after him. I'm like, oh shit, that's right.
And they have that awesome shot where he's on the motorcycle. That's one of the funniest shots in the movie to me, is before the kid gets hit. Like, how many times did they have that actor doing that jump and like he's like rotating the front wheel? It's just so ridiculously goofy. It actually cracks me up. I guess I'm just a terrible person, but I love just some of those shots. Like, just thinking about behind the scenes, like how many times they did that jump and how ridiculous they can try to how over the top they can be to try to add to the drama, and really it just like has the opposite effect, and it kind of pulls you out a little bit.
I think the fact that they do the 2 jumps pulls you out as well. Like, you kind of have the fake out. We all know it's coming,
Right.
So the first one is just pissed me off, because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's your moment. Like, this could have been so much better if they just edited out that first jump.
Yes. No, you have the first jump, hits Billy, and then Steve is the one who does it, and then the next motorcycle comes and squashes him.
Yes. Yeah, hit him twice if you have to. Or
no, I meant hit Steve, not Billy.
But no, one thing I want to ask you guys, and again, this is probably my lit crit background and my writer insanity of needing to know too much about backgrounds for characters and then never ever talking about them. I think Billy's mom died, and the dog,
yes,
and the dog was the one that was there for him because Dad didn't know how to handle it, and that's why Dad takes care of him, but he doesn't feel overly connected to Billy. And yet, when Billy dies, it sends him over the edge because it's the connection he still has to his wife.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I
That would
really
work
like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's what you guys pulled from it or like, I don't know, but that's where I was. And I think that made knowing Billy has to die. Like, even if I knew nothing about this film, like, come on, we know Billy has to die, right? And
I wish that was the title of the movie, just Billy
has to die. And then he dies 5 minutes in. And then we're like, oh, what's this movie about now? But that would really make Billy Has to Die Blood Wings really weird. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that with the dog and the mom and the craziness I just said?
I definitely think that there's the reason that resonates with me is because I felt that there was that tension in the breakfast scene again, where he is trying to be caring and warm and loving, and maybe it's just something about like Lance Henriksen and his personality, or maybe it's something about what was in the script, but it seems like he's trying to connect with Billy, but it's not really successful. Like, they're not exactly on that same wavelength. Whereas the relationship between Billy and Gypsy just feels completely natural and organic, and I buy that 100%. And when I started thinking about that other theory that had to do with trauma and the subconscious, then I started thinking about, well, okay, what is the backstory of Ed's wife? And so I came up with something that's even more preposterous, which I'll offer up just so that you guys can have a chuckle. So as a kid, we know that Ed witnessed something traumatic. And what if later, as he grows up, he's this, and this sort of dovetails a little bit with that review where they were mapping Ed to the idea of the ego. So the ego just being purely in control. He's responsible. Everything is good as far as his parenting is concerned. So potentially you could say, okay, he's overcompensating, right? And he's kind of just being much more ego than anything else. So what if that prolonged repression slowly drove him insane and he actually killed his own wife? Because we don't know the backstory of Betty. And it's interesting that after Billy dies, like there's that scene where he very briefly talks to his wife. He like says a line. I mean, she's obviously long been deceased. We see the tombstone, which is where you see the name Betty. But I thought that was kind of creepy that he would actually say something out loud to his long dead wife. And then the other thing too, there's the scene where the teenagers are driving towards this place and they're like, oh, there's this rumor of a guy who killed his wife. And, they point to this guy on the road and they make this terrible joke about foot stew, which I don't know why I wrote down that happens at around minute 13, but I don't think that's significant in any way.
They're already talking about foot stew. This is way too early.
But yeah, what if that rumor about the guy killing his wife actually got started because Ed was the guy that killed his wife?
I love that.
In that in that interpretation, then when he unleashes Pumpkinhead, it would make sense that he would become guilty and that he would become like more kind of psychically connected with Pumpkinhead because of all of the stuff that he's already done.
But to play on that, the theme like totally makes sense. If Billy has a disconnect with his father, it's like, is there some sort of foresight, or he's already seen that his dad is a monster and he literally becomes a monster?
Oh, that's even better. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of fun.
Well, that's headcanon in my world now.
Man, I hope we got to do a Reddit post here. Let this for the like 13 other people in the world that love this movie as much as I do. That you've really offered some brain candy there.
I just want you to know only 11 of them have Reddit, so we're gonna have to find ways to reach out to the others.
I was talking. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. And, actually, that one of the a point that I wanted to bring up and get your opinion on, just speaking about Reddit and tech and the modern world, is the movie. Even though it's technically an older film, it takes place in a present day modern world, but it abandons all of that. It doesn't feel modern. It's like that's the Southern Gothic horror backwoods vibe that just 100% abandons modern comforts and everything like that. I think to amp up the creep factor, really the only modern, everyday world comforts, I don't know if comfort's even the right word, but the only thing that we see in the film that really grounds it in the 1980s is, the motorcycles and the cars. There's not much else beyond that. And I think that backwoods element really adds to the atmosphere.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that it is a modern film, but it doesn't feel that way,
Well, and I think even if I believe you said it's being rebooted, but even if you dropped it today, right? Like where they are, your cell phone signal would suck. So you're going to eliminate those pretty quickly. Exactly. And then the things that you could use it for would be like using a flashlight or things like that, or taking a picture, which you could do really creepy shit with. So I don't think it would lose anything. I think that it's very, very believable, given where they are, that kind of stuff wouldn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to add to your thing, I like that idea, and I like that when we get to the sequences which are at night, it becomes sort of even more primal. You've got all of this storm-like phenomena. Mm-hmm. And to me, that just helped to make it feel timeless in that sense. So I agree with you, Josh.
And I think that goes back to what I was saying originally about how it doesn't feel like it all takes place in one time.
Right.
Like I feel like different people are are just like coexisting in this one plane, but like this guy over here lives in like the 1950s and this guy over here lives in the 1890s, like it was such a weird feel. But I feel like that's what small towns can be like. Like I grew up in Nebraska and I grew up in Lincoln, which is a city, if you will, depending. I live in Phoenix now, so I don't know if I consider that a city anymore, but that's on me. But
wasteland.
Anyway, so like when I went to small town Nebraska, and I'm not just talking farmland, I'm talking like these little towns that have looked the same for like 70 years.
Right.
It's that same feeling to me. It's like time traveling in some ways. But then there's like one or two things that pull me back to the now, like the Powerball sign at the gas station or some shit like that, And I feel like this movie really pulls off that feeling.
Yeah, speaking, I grew up in Nebraska as well, in the small town setting, hence the ultra evangelical cult like. But my town, I think the population was 1,400, which compared to some of the other towns that were, half an hour or so away, was even, the population was even smaller. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess maybe that's something that I kind of relate to, and it's comfortable for me a little bit. Like it's the movie is odd as it is, for being so dark and so brutal. It's cozy. That's just how I that's how I feel about it. But yeah, the kind of backwoods small town vibe. You're right. You go out today, and if it was filmed in the same way, shape, and form, it I think it would totally work. And that's actually what I like about going back to it. It's not so dated as far as the technology is concerned, because because since the pandemic started, I've been revisiting some older films that I haven't seen for a while, kind of a backlog of either films that I haven't seen or that I haven't seen in a while. And it's funny, even when I got to Scream, just how dated the tech works, and how that movie just would have to totally be written to work, in modern times. So the setting works for this one, I think.
One of the things that you were talking about earlier, Josh, and I'm so glad you brought it up, it has to do with your sort of, your religious upbringing and how that influenced your vision of the monster. And I think for me, it ties a little bit into what you're talking about, that feeling, the like rural setting seemed familiar to you, and the timeless quality meshes up with that really nicely. Another thing that occurred to me while watching the movie, outside of the thing with the church, I don't think that there was really a lot of explicitly religious things, but I think that maybe one of the sort of moral through lines that you could argue is that the sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the sons. Because I kept wondering, like, what's the point of that whole prologue? So not only is Ed traumatized, which kind of goes with that trauma theory, but he sees that they refuse to help someone that's in desperate need, who then dies, right? And so Ed's father is responsible for cruelty, which leads to a man's death. And in a sense, that casts a shadow on his own son's life, eventually leading to the death of his son's wife and his grandson and his son.
Wow.
Damn.
So the only thing that I took from the prologue, and I don't know if I'm making this too simplistic, but it was he's seen it, so he knows it's real, and that's why he knows he can call on it. Yeah. And while I like that, I don't think it was necessary at all. Like, this whole town obviously fucking believes. And it's kind of weird because the kids think that it's like a myth, and it's this fun little thing that they threaten each other with, which is totally normal, but the adults are scared shitless of it.
Yeah, they're we're not going to tell you where Haggis is.
And I think that that's weird in itself, because wouldn't you be grinding into your kids that's fucking real? Don't fuck with that. Like, I don't want you taking your dead cat to Haggis and some bad shit happens. No,
But they may be. I mean, it is one of those things that because no one has seen Pumpkinhead in 40 years, they may have drilled it into him like, oh, I heard what you were talking about. Don't you ever fucking do that, because this will happen or this will happen. And there's a difference between belief and knowing. So the parents know, the kids believe. And belief is one of those things that you have to test every now and then to see if it is true, or whatever you believe is true. So, just that idea of throwing it out as a threat with friends, relatives, whatever, is all fun. I mean, it goes with childhood, like, oh, the boogeyman's going to come and get you, or whatever type of shit that's out there, right? But I think Pumpkinhead would be the same type of threat, or at least the same type of belief that we base things like Krampus and Santa Claus on. At a certain point, you know what the truth is, right? But you go
Krampus
on believing.
Is real.
Yeah, you go on believing it until you're told otherwise, or at least until you know and you have it confirmed. So you have a good number of kids that they wait and they accidentally see their parents leaving the gifts out, or they find the stash and I'm like, oh, there's no fucking Santa Claus. You guys buy all this shit for me. And you have Bunt, who
spoilers.
Yeah. He lives within your heart. But if you have somebody like Bunt, who is curious about it, who does know a little bit about what's going on, he does it because at least he gives this information to Ed because he wants to know if it's true. And you get that understanding when the kids all run to the settlement, to this little village, that they're looking for some type of sanctuary. Bunt is inside, leaves his sister, and says, I got to know if it's real. I mean, just how he's kind of set these things in motion as well. Like, hey, if this guy goes out there and does it and nothing happens, then it's all bullshit. We don't have anything to be scared of. But now that these people are running to this house, scared shitless, oh my God, it's got to be real. I need to see it. I just want to see. And just think about the childhood curiosity we have where you want to see something that you've been told about so many times.
I think that's really interesting, especially when you put it in context with Alvaro's theory about Ed killing his wife. Because if Ed knew and believed, not just believed, if Ed saw it and he knew that this thing was real and that it came after, and maybe he didn't understand the reasoning why Pumpkinhead existed, but I believe that he did. Would he have murdered his wife? Would he have done something so vile and so wrong if he knew that this thing is out there? It could come after him for doing something so terrible. So and then when you think about it, from the idea that maybe Ed, I wish they would have played with that a little bit more. Maybe he just thought he knew, but he was a little kid, and maybe he processed it wrong, and he didn't really see what he thought he saw. So maybe it was more of a belief. That it would have been cool if they played with more of those themes there. So that's a really good point. I like that.
Well, speaking of that, as far as belief in myths, even fairy tales for that matter. Are there any legends or stories that any of you would want to experience just to see if it's real or not?
When you say experience, like
I mean, just you just have to. I don't mean like be getting chased down by Pumpkinhead, but I mean as far as like some. I'm saying,
like, are you asking would I like to go to Santa's workshop?
Okay, that could work. I mean, just some legend, some folk tale, something that that you've heard, that you've told, that you've read, that you would want to know whether or not it's true, and that would involve witnessing it taking place.
I have one, but it's really obscure, and I want to qualify this with I don't want it to kill me or hurt me in any way. The Vietnamese in particular have this belief in a blue tiger. And it's a very mythological creature. And I really want to see it because tigers are my favorite animals. And the idea of this elusive blue tiger, like to see it in its natural habitat and like, I think that would be fucking amazing. But no, I do not want to raise Pumpkinhead.
I think more of a modern fairy tale that's being talked about quite a lot right now is that Biden's going to win, and I think I would like to experience that.
Ooh, can I change my answer to agree with that guy?
I know I can't really think of some folklore that I mean I would like to call upon Pumpkinhead. That would be sweet. I just don't want to be psychically connected or become the next iteration.
Since two of you brought up a couple, James brought up one, and of course the one that we all hope happens. I think because I have a daughter, and because it's become one of those things that has become ubiquitous in my home, I would have to go with a unicorn or a Pegasus.
Unicorn would be cool. I agree.
And I want to see if unicorns are good or evil. I want that debate settled.
Yeah. Well, where do you stand on that debate?
I don't know. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, they're always represented as good, but then every now and then you see bad unicorns, which I think in Cabin in the Woods, they actually had evil. I shouldn't say evil. They were unicorns. You can't necessarily say an animal is evil or not. But the unicorns were being used to, they were going to potentially be used in the sacrifices, which would have been awesome. But you get that payoff when this facility, all the cages get open and, the unicorn is just stabbing or goring the guy with its horn, which is awesome. So, I would just like to know if they're inherently good, bad, or I mean, as far as demonic creatures, or if they're complex. You got good unicorns, bad unicorns, those that are fighting for balance, that type of stuff.
I like that one.
Either that,
you should do it. You should. Your next episode should be on the last unicorn. I think
God. I think someone down the line is going to request that one. If they don't,
I'm so busy that day.
It's either going to be that or Legend.
Oh yeah, Legend. I forgot about that. That played a pretty integral part in the plot. Not really, but a fun little element there.
You did say myths or legends, so it fits your original question.
That's true.
I think for me, I would pick something that has to do either with any myth that has to do with immortality, like the Gilgamesh myth or something like that, or to go with something more modern and horror related. I'm really curious about the interface between the dream world and the real world. So if I could maybe get to have a little one-on-one time with Freddy and come out of it alive, that would be fantastic.
One-on-one time makes me think that you sit him down for therapy.
That would go better than it would with Jason.
Or it's a little hot and spicy.
Another thing is ghosts. I would desperately like to, I've had weird experiences, but definitive proof that ghosts exist or do not. And that comes with a price, though, much like Pumpkinhead, because once you know there's an afterlife, no matter what it is, it changes every decision that you make after that.
Mm.
So, I'm going to stick with my tiger, but ghosts are up there.
Because I think that the concept of an afterlife as a ghost, where all you do in your afterlife is just shake pots and pans and flip light switches, is just a really unique concept.
And throwing books off the shelf. Don't forget about that one.
Right. And lifting some
more
beds.
Like Beetlejuice. Not him, but like the Maitlands. Hang out, listen to music, work on some stuff I didn't finish.
I'm curious. I'm looking up the running time for Pumpkinhead, and it's interesting that we had enough to say about it. A little bit more. The running time is 1 hour and 27 minutes. So, you guys found 1.5 hours to complain about it. I think that's great.
All right. Well, there's no complaint. I like this one. This again, having passed roughly 30 years since the first time I've seen it, or the first and the second time now. I again, a lot of the themes, a lot of the issues hold up. My perspective on it changed because of age, because of life, things like that. But the perspective I have is I wanted the kids dead within the first 5 minutes. And if the reboot does get made or it becomes a series, but budget is a lot higher, you have the same types of quality horror people involved, I think you can really do something with this one that takes advantage of I don't want to necessarily say income inequality, but as far as the regional identities that people have, whether it happens to be rural versus urban, poor versus well off, whether that happens to be upper middle class, upper class, whatever. So you can actually get into some of those issues where there is more interaction between those college kids and the country folk, to where they do more than just, oh, look at this kid with his Coke bottle glasses. Like I could have seen them saying, like, who are these fucking bumpkins getting out of here with no shoes on? My wife made a joke about the movie, and not necessarily at the expense of anybody in it, but as soon as they drove up in the truck and the 5 kids were in the back of the truck, she laughed because we had just finished watching the episode of The Simpsons, and Cletus had driven off somewhere with all the kids in the back of his truck.
Awesome.
And she just started laughing because she's like, "Oh my God, we just watched this."
It's Cletus.
It's like, yeah, like, where's Brandine? But I think there's a lot that can go, or a lot more that can go into this, because there can be a greater hatred of that group of kids that goes beyond just the hatred of Steve and him being an asshole. It could be several of them are just idiots and drinking or getting high, or because the store was left unwatched, one of them decides to take something and little Billy chases after them and gets hit by a car.
Even how they react to the people that live there. Like, you could make them an asshole that way easily.
Yeah, they drive through their shacks and, like, and throwing beer cans or whatever. I mean, there's so much that can go on, because we talked about this on another episode. I can't remember which one, but it might have been Tucker and Dale. And we were talking about that film. Whereas with this film, Tucker
and Dale, which comes out next week. Oh, anyway, continue.
Well, yeah. Anyway, with this one, like, country folk don't scare me at all. Like, when I watch this film, I see these people as hardworking, salt of the earth folks. They don't give a damn about you. They're more concerned with where their next meal is going to come from. Harvesting crops, taking animals to be sold or slaughtered. That's what their concern is. But they're definitely proud. They're not going to let you talk shit to them. And I would love an interaction where they're going to the doors and Mr. Wallace basically has this reaction like, "Get the fuck away from my house." Just like, "Oh, it wasn't good enough for you when you guys were, driving past here, but now, now you need our help. Fuck you, enjoy Pumpkinhead."
That should be
fast
right there.
Yes. Really fast, just to go back to your Cletus comment. Don't forget, during all of October, we're doing 31 episodes of Treehouse of Horror and dropping an episode every single day. Thanks for letting me throw that in there.
Well, something else we didn't talk about, and James is going to kill me if I don't mention this, or at least threaten to, and then
I'm going to kill you either way.
No, it's not going to happen. The Pumpkinhead's genitalia. Because we talked about this on the episode of Splice, where there's a lot of anatomically correct things that take place or discussed or analyzed. Does Pumpkinhead assume the gender of the individual who is sacrificed as part of its quest?
I actually read the answer to that.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
Do you guys want to go first, or do you want the actual answer?
Well, my thought is just that, being very practical, it doesn't require genitalia, right? Because it's just assuming it takes the form of whoever called it, called upon it. So yeah.
Well, what I mean, because you've got Ed, who is whose body is going to be used for the next resurrection of him, right? Or it next. So my question, and this is really just because I thought about Splice when we were watching this film last night, and the idea that would you also have the attitude and mannerisms of that person, or is it a thing where the demon just needs your body to be the host in order to hit this moment of I guess development or evolving into the demon or growing into the demon?
Maybe. I mean, the movie, it's really interesting because obviously they didn't think any of this through. At least I don't think they did. But as the movie progresses, we see them kind of Pumpkinhead takes on Lance's facial characteristics, and then Lance kind of looks more monstrous. But then after it's all said and done, it's basically Pumpkinhead baby form with Lance's hair. It really makes there's no logical thought process behind it. But I don't know. I'm interested to hear what the answer is.
Yeah, me too. What's the answer, James?
The answer is really disappointing. Basically, it just said that it doesn't matter. It's always just going to be Pumpkinhead.
Okay.
And that while the body is necessary for the demon to have a door into the world, it still turns into itself.
Okay.
So it would have whatever genitalia it currently has, if it has any. And but yeah, they said in the thing I read, according to legend, it's been men, it's been women, and it doesn't change anything. And I think it said no one would know because there's no difference.
Because it's all latex.
Exactly. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to throw. So we've talked about some other horror movie franchises, and just two comments. So one, you were talking earlier, Josh, about if they were going to redo Scream, you would need to update the technology. So I just wanted to mention, I just read about Scream 5 being confirmed and casting starting on that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an interesting theory about that too. I don't know if it's true, or a rumor, I should say. Is it the? I don't know if it's confirmed, but it's going to be meta. Is that true? Have you guys heard that? That it's the new Scream? From what I read was that they're casting some of the original cast to play themselves in the film. I don't know if that's true or not.
I heard that about Courtney Cox.
Okay.
I had
not sure about everybody else.
I mean, it certainly wouldn't surprise me.
So, and then the second thing actually does tie back to Pumpkinhead, and because we've talked about there potentially being a reboot of the movie. So I would want to pitch in a crazy world where we could get anything. I would love to see a crossover between Pumpkinhead and the Hellraiser universe.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because I think that if you wanted to be really far-fetched, you could think about Pumpkinhead as a secret Hellraiser prequel. So here's where I'm going with this one. There's that scene where Ed is trying to look for Haggis so that he can get his son back, blah, blah, blah. And it's this very iconic line that is also in the original trailer where he's told by the other guy, all she can do is take you straight to hell. So what if Ed, when he dies, does indeed end up in hell because of all of his terrible actions? First of all, that would explain why Lance Henriksen was actually cast in the role of the host in Hellraiser Hellworld, because it was him. And it might tie a little bit to the design of Pumpkinhead too, in the sense that the Cenobites, they have these horrific mutilations and disfigurements, and in the sort of mythology of Hellraiser, the Cenobites were formerly humans, and there's something about Pumpkinhead that's clearly human-ish, and it also has a lot of disfigurations, and it seems to be made up of things that were maybe once dead. So I thought that was a fun little throwaway idea.
That's fun. The great thing too is Lance Henriksen could return in the role of Pumpkinhead without any creature effects. If you've seen what he looks like today.
Wow, this really holds up. Hey, Don, did you know that Mayim Bialik plays Wallace Kid #1?
Bullshit.
Seriously, it's her film debut. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to go back and look at it again.
All right. Do you guys have anything to add before we roll into the end of this?
I'm just going to give you were talking about film recommendations to try to pair it up with something along those lines. So I'll give
let's go there.
Yeah. So I will do cool little movie that came out in 1997. The reason I'm going to suggest it is because it also has a fairy tale feeling. It's more explicitly even a fairy tale. And it stars Sigourney Weaver and Sam Neill, who have obviously done a lot of great genre stuff. It's called Snow White, A Tale of Terror, and it's very gothic.
Fun movie.
I remember that one, yeah.
That.
What's yours
to go next?
Well, just in the vein of like an 80s creature feature night, I mean, there's so many options there because it's like, that's where it was at. But I don't know if I had to just to stay in the, stick with in the vein of a Stan Winston night. I would totally pair it up with Aliens. Obviously, the level of the difference in quality is substantial, but pay tribute to Stan Winston. He did some amazing stuff.
All right, and I'll go with one that hopefully we've all seen, Urban Legends, and it's kind of one I would have recommended if we were talking about Scream as well. But this one gets into that whole idea of a bunch of college kids start screwing around and figuring and start trying to test certain things. So, and of course, it turns into a different type of movie. But they have a class where they're discussing urban legends, and Robert Englund is the professor leading this class. And so initially some of the students start trying out things like Bloody Mary. And it gets into that whole thing of, I just want to see if it's real. I know it's bullshit, but I want to see if it's real. And they all start getting killed based off of various urban legends.
And it's interesting is apparently they're rebooting that one too.
Oh, good, because the second one, not good.
All right, so mine, it's kind of a creature feature. I consider it a creature feature. 1988's The Blob.
Oh.
And I don't know if you know this, but The Blob kind of comes from the multiplex. So got that going on.
Yeah. That's a fun movie. Yeah. I love that.
And it holds up in the same sort of way. I really think that 88's version is the best Blob that we've had. And even watching it today, it's so good. It's soaked in social commentary. I mean, to me, these can go hand in hand and you can have a really fun film night.
Great pairing.
Definitely.
All right. So do you guys want to tell everybody where they can find you online and how to get the book?
Yeah. So you can visit hexpublishers.com. And the book is available there, as well as all of the other major online retailers. And audiobook is in production now, so I'm excited about that. That'll be out next year.
Nice.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at Zinos-Amaro. I'm also on Facebook, although I use that less often. Have this story coming out in Josh's anthology. I also have a new science fiction story coming out in the magazine Galaxy's Edge. That'll probably get posted within the week. I'm writing reviews for Locus. If you guys are interested in nonfiction books about science fiction, fantasy, and horror, the one that I just did about a horror book is available on their website. I'll be doing more movie reviews for Josh at the Hex Publishers website, Words. And then I also did an interview with a pretty well-known scientist recently that will be published in Analog Magazine.
And I wanted to make an update. We've canceled all movie reviews with Alvaro's. So I'm sorry to give you this information now.
I was really looking forward to The Last Jedi.
Actually, I do want you to legit review Pumpkinhead. I'm serious. You need to do that.
I was going to say, Josh, how can you cancel it now? I was going to do all of the Pumpkinhead franchise.
Yes.
No, but really, I want let's do it for Halloween. Let's have you review Pumpkinhead, your traditional hex style. So
sweet. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this week. So I want to thank you guys for coming on. Thank you again for the advanced copy of the book as well. I am really enjoying it, and I'll probably finish it up in the next couple days. But yeah, man, like this was such a great kick to the past and that nostalgia while still bringing something new. And I'm a huge anthology fan anyway, so that's straight up my alley. But it's just nice to see something a little different. And like I said, I love all the extras, like the flip book animation and all that stuff. I think this is going to be a really fun book, and people should definitely pick it up.
Thanks so much for having us. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. So until next time, as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.